everyone, and welcome to the Global Atheist News spin-off show. Now, this is unlike the news itself, which is intended to be dispassionate, impartial, just delivering the facts. This is where we get to express our views on the news. Okay, so today we have, as you can see, Dread Pyrate Higgs from British Columbia. No hat, though. I'm disappointed in the absence of hats.
No eye patch, no hook.
Yes, no parrot. And we have Guy Otten from the environs of Manchester, Northern England.
Manchester, UK, that is.
Yeah, absolutely. We have Frank Lovell, who's in Kentucky, which I've discovered is pretty much in the center of the US, a bit south of the lakes, but not very south. It depends. It's a sort of a funny shape, so it depends which end of it you are. And we have Dr. Ty Wells, who's also in the same sort of part of the world, but he seems to have gone all AWOL at the moment.
Yeah, my camera just kind of died at the last moment. I hope you can still hear me. I'll be right back.
Yeah, we can. Yeah. Okay. I thought maybe your new lack of attire might have broken the lens.
Yeah, maybe. Let's see.
Anyway, let's go, guys, because I don't want to waste your time. So the news this week. Oh, he's back. Hello, Ty. The news this week has been crammed with examples of religious impact on humanity. I had to shorten some of the items for the show, the news show itself, the report on the news, because I only wanted to take half an hour. And therefore, it was lots of little short snippets. But now we can spend a little more time on some of the more important ones. Now, there's a guy, a clergyman named Father Pluzhnik, he resides in northeastern Ukraine, and his church used to belong to the branch of the Russian Orthodox Church, which takes its direction from the religious leadership in Moscow. He's changed. He has now applied to join the Ukrainian Orthodox Church. And he says many fellow priests who used to follow Patriarch Kirill, the Moscow leader, are doing the same thing because of the Moscow leader stance on the war. He says, when the war started, I was waiting to hear from Patriarch Kirill of Moscow, the father of our church, but first there was no reaction at all, and then there was worse. He says, Patriarch Kirill blessed the Russian army and gave his blessing to the war. I was in shock. What do you think of that?
I was in shock too.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, this used to be common that religious leaders seem to approve the nation's war mongering, but I've noticed a reduction in that in recent years. Certainly, with in Britain's and I think American military activity, we haven't noticed it. We've seen religious leaders actually quite critical of military expeditions and war. So it is a bit of a. I think it's sad. It's sad that this man has made that statement, and it demonstrates the shallowness of religious faith.
Yes, they're only moral if it agrees with their nationalism.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And it also it's just another demonstration of the of the vacuity of religious blessings in the first place, because the other side is doing the very same thing to the very same God.
Yep.
It's almost a meaningless gesture outside of its political one.
What are they getting paid for?
Yeah.
Guys,
are they in offices all day? Sorry for interrupting. Go for it.
You guys in America, in the southernish part of America, when it was the Civil War, was God on both sides then?
Yes. I mean,
Yeah.
documented. So
Both
both in
sides.
the declarations of war by the states
Yeah.
on both sides
Yeah.
was appeals to the moral high ground where they would tie in, ties to God and slavery at the same times in the same sentence. It's very interesting.
Yeah.
So I think in the First World War, God was on both sides.
Yeah.
Probably in the Second World War as well.
God
Yeah.
loves to hedge his bets. What can you say? What can you say?
That doesn't really resonate with his alleged moral superiority.
Well, that's how you make sure you're always on the side of the people who write the history books, right?
Right.
Yes. Anyway, you remember the Moskva, the missile-armed flagship of the Black Sea Fleet, the Russian warship that was sunk last week. Well, we now discover that on board it had a piece of the true cross.
Oh, yes, right. Okay, now it's coming back to me. Yes.
This Christian relic, presumably as some sort of symbol of, I don't know.
A good luck charm?
Yeah,
But it didn't save the ship, did it?
No. Anyway, this was given to that ship. It was installed in that ship in 2020, and presumably it's now at the bottom of the Black Sea.
Yeah.
Not enough of that has been made in the news. Really,
No.
I think that needs to be featured. I'm going to do my best to feature some of that.
Great. Thanks,
Well,
Frank.
I think you have to bear in mind that there are enough pieces of the true cross to build several houses.
Yes.
Huh. That's funny.
Yes. This is true is written in quotes in this.
There's probably enough to build Noah's Ark.
Probably, yeah.
Well, that's already been built. So, yeah.
Anyway, moving on.
It reminds me that back in the 80s, when British women especially were demonstrating against American cruise missiles at Greenham Common,
Yeah.
my wife was doing it at the time. She came back one weekend with back to Manchester where we were living. She went down specially to demonstrate. She came back with a piece of the true fence.
Nice.
I'm much more likely to believe that relic was actually a piece of the fence.
It certainly was.
Just making one last point on this, I feel like it's the sort of thing where even if it was what it's claimed to be, that's probably the last thing Jesus wants to see when he comes back, right? It's like, hey, I'm back. What's that? What's that? Oh, you won't believe where I got this. I don't want to see those. I hate those. I hate crosses, guys. Messaging all messed up, guys.
Yes, I mean, it is pretty bizarre to have a symbol of torture as the sort of icon of your religion. I mean, it's obscene, actually.
If you could go back in time and meet JFK, you wouldn't show him a bullet, right? Like,
right.
Same thing.
There is a moral lesson, though. Or I don't know about moral lesson, but there's a lesson in this warship sinking with a piece of the cross. If anybody graces you with a piece of the cross, as soon as they're not looking, get rid of that thing. You don't want to keep that on you.
Yeah, it's not good luck, is it?
Yeah,
It's like a rabbit's foot. The rabbit's foot of religion.
It's the most awkward setting for an elevator conversation because you meet Jesus, you're like, hey, guess what this thing is? It's the thing that you died on. Isn't that awesome? And Jesus is like, I hate fans.
You want the elevator to yourself. Bring that out and show everybody and mention that. Pretty soon you'll be alone.
And a rabbit's foot wasn't good luck for a rabbit, was it?
No, it certainly wasn't.
Where's my atheist at? That's what Jesus is thinking.
Yeah.
What I'm wondering, though, is if Jesus had actually been hanged rather than crucified, would the Christians all be going around with a little noose around them?
Right. I was thinking guillotined. Get a little bit more metal with it. And then you'd have the falling blade or something. But yeah, it's an easy thing to make. Yeah. It's just a T.
Yeah. Even a carpenter can make that.
Moving on to Afghan, which, doesn't like to stay out of the news, the religious news, for long. There were, very sadly, 2 bomb blasts at a boys' school in the capital, Kabul, that killed at least 6 people and wounded more than 20. Now, so far, there's been no immediate claim of responsibility, but Islamic State militants have attacked that area in the past. So what we've got to realize here is that the Taliban, one Muslim fundamentalist group, and the Islamic State, another fundamentalist Muslim Islamic group, don't actually like each other much. This is Muslim on Muslim violence.
Well, wait a minute. This school was actually a Shia school, wasn't it?
Yeah.
And I think that's the key here.
Yeah.
That
The Sunnis are after the Shias.
That's right. It's a Sunni stroke Shia. Well, the Shias in Afghanistan and the Hazara community is a minority community who are mostly Shia, have been persecuted for a long time by the Sunni majority. And now they're this is just a continuation of that. That's how I read it.
Mm.
Yeah. So there's no love lost between those different sects of the same religion.
That's
No,
right.
clearly. Yeah.
It's like Catholic and Protestant in Northern Ireland sort of stuff.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's like the West Side Baptist Church and the North Side Baptist Church in like every town in the South, basically.
Right.
Yeah. Yes, indeed.
Yeah.
So you may remember some years ago now, just 2 or 3 years back, there was a group of horrible jihadists that were nicknamed the Beatles because they had British accent. And I can imagine that Sir Paul McCartney is not happy with that description. But one of them has survived. The others got shot or variously destroyed. But one of them, who's called El Shafi El Sheikh, has been arrested. He's now in the States. And he's been in a trial has been conducted because of his involvement in this notorious Islamic State terror cell. You may remember seeing some really horrifying videos where these guys were bragging at how they killed various members of various Americans and British people, that they had held hostages. This one, the remaining one, has had a trial. He was found guilty of lethal hostage taking and conspiracy to commit murder, and we're waiting to hear about his sentence.
Yeah, I mean, he's notorious in Manchester because an aid worker based in Manchester was one of the ones that was killed by him, apparently.
Was that David Haynes or Alan Henning?
Alan Henning, I think his name was. Yeah.
It's
Really
a sad state, and whatever the sentence is, of course, pales in comparison to the destruction and the terror, right?
Yeah, really nasty piece of work.
Yeah,
he deserves whatever's coming. Meanwhile, another country which likes to have an ongoing religious dispute is Israel, of course.
Oh, okay.
and being a concurrence between Ramadan, Easter, and the Jewish religious festival, whose name escapes me.
Passover.
That's the one. Yeah, they've all happened more or less at the same time this year because they have different calendars and sometimes they go in and out of phase. But this year they've all been in the same week. So what happened was a far-right Jewish group that goes by the name Return to Temple Mount offered by video a cash prize to anyone who went into the Al-Aqsa Mosque, mind you, and sacrificed a goat, which is a Jewish religious ritual. Now, that was calculated to upset a few people. It didn't happen. The sacrifice didn't actually happen, but the video went viral and provoked a lot of tension. So there was days of stone throwing riots outside the compound, well, in the compound outside this mosque. And the Israeli police had to enter there, and they detained hundreds of people who were piling up stones. And 19 people were injured. 9 were arrested after they smashed the windows of buses that were bringing Jewish visitors to the site. Tear gas, rubber bullets, and stun grenades were used. So, what do you reckon about that? Is it ever going to come to an end?
If they had rubber bullets all the time, why are they still throwing stones? They can learn some things.
Well, the police had the rubber bullets.
Well, you know,
I'm waiting for the vegans and the Royal Society for Prevention of Cruelty to Animals to demonstrate against the goat slaughter.
Yes. Well, it didn't happen. The goat still lives.
No, that's good news.
well, maybe they could have a plant-based goat.
Yes.
But I mean, I think that there is an ongoing problem with the Israel and Palestine issue, and it's very sad. And I mean, I sympathise with Palestinians who feel that they are being occupied by a foreign power and having their land stolen from them, and they're being ethnically cleansed.
Yeah.
I think this is not really on. I mean, you know, people accuse the West of colonialism and imperialism. Well, you know, there it is happening.
Yeah.
Classically, that, you know, people. Well, what's the difference between Israel doing that and Putin trying to snatch Ukraine?
Yeah.
Yeah, not much, is there? And
Well,
yet, the difference in attention is pretty stark, right?
Yep.
It's like they're getting a pass on this stuff, whereas Putin and Ukraine and all that is, you know, front and center.
Yeah.
Exactly.
You know, it would be interesting because on our earlier show, the Free Thought show, I had mentioned that an Ipsos Reid poll in Canada was showing a pretty stark increase in irreligiosity. And so, you know, it would be interesting to see what the state of that state of affairs and religiosity or irreligiosity in Israel is, or in Palestine, because maybe the answer to your question, will it ever end? It may be there's just not enough people picking up weapons on behalf of their religious beliefs and throwing it up, you know, killing each other over it. You know, maybe it'll just come to a time where, you know, people just get tired of believing in that silly stuff and
wouldn't that
find some other thing to fight about.
Yeah. And
what's for dinner? What's for dinner?
Yeah. You can fight about real things, but there's no point fighting about religion.
Yeah, exactly.
But the trouble is, within that about a square mile of the Near East, they all think they own it. The head of Hamas warned that Al-Aqsa, the mosque, is ours and ours alone. And of course, just down the road, the Jews are saying the same thing to the Wailing Wall, which is part of this area.
Yeah.
What I like about the Al-Aqsa Mosque is that that there's an inscription inside that was actually about Jesus Christ, but has been understood to be about Allah and Muhammad. And there's some fascinating books written about this. It was, you know, the place was built and that inscription was put there at a time actually before Islam as we now know it formed.
Yes.
Fascinating story.
Yes.
Well, someone ought to go in there and change the inscription to read Temet Noce. Know thyself.
Okay. Well, are you volunteering?
Take your goat along at the same time.
Yes, take a goat. I will. A plant-based goat.
Now, you may remember a few years ago also, there was a horrendous event, a killing, a mass killing in Paris at the, what is it called, the Bataclan theatre where people were attending a performance of some rock band, some French rock band or other, and an Islamic State cell targeted Paris. They didn't only hit the Bataclan, there were other drinking and eating venues in the city that were shot up as well. But we have Salah Abdeslam, who is a surviving member of that Islamic State cell that did the shoot up. And he is in court now. 130 people were killed. And he's saying, I wish to express my condolences and offer an apology to all the victims. He says his suicide belt didn't malfunction. He decided not to set it off when he saw the people that he was going to kill. So now he's asking for forgiveness. Well, he's in court charged with involvement in this. He hasn't yet, the court hasn't yet decided, he's not been convicted, but at the moment he already, it will be a life sentence if he is convicted, but he's already been handed a jail sentence by a Belgian court for his part in a different shootout in Brussels when police arrested him. So it's a pretty tall story that he's telling, right, that, you know, he's as pure as the day is.
Yeah, because the thing in Brussels happened after the thing in Paris, right? Exactly. So he's exhibiting the behavior and the sort of mentality or whatever in the Brussels incident, which is an extension of his position in the Paris thing, right?
Yes.
Yeah. Now, did they what is the point they're trying to make in just this violence and killing people and stuff? Like, what are, you know, they're in an Islamic cell. What are they trying to demonstrate?
Fear lends to control, or basically. I do have this weird question, and I'm not sure how I'll play on this audience, but the punishment for being a suicide bomber is a life sentence? ? And does that sit right with everybody?
Yeah, I mean, it does. We've abolished capital punishment basically everywhere in Europe. But I mean, the thing about these Islamic extremists is that they're not necessarily fixed for all time. They move into Islamic extremism. They get groomed or they get radicalized. Many of them move out of it, and there are some notable, like Majid Nawaz, who is a former extremist, who is now, argues against extremism.
Mm-hmm.
And so it doesn't all that surprise me if he's apologizing for it. I don't know how sincere he is, but it's plausible that he no longer agrees with what he himself has done.
But that was the point about bringing up the Brussels thing, right? Is that happened after the Paris thing, and it exhibits the same sort of behavior and mentality that he's trying to say he's sorry for. Which
the thing is,
it doesn't say.
He should be apologizing for that as well. I mean, the Brussels thing was as I understand it, correct me if I'm wrong here, it was part of the chase of the terrorists. It happened within a day or two of the Bataclan event, while the police were cornering them, and then there was a shootout, I think.
Yes.
Yeah, that's right. And so,
So what we're saying is that his contrition has come about quite recently when he realized what his prospects were.
Sure. If he was that sorry for Paris, he would have just turned himself over instead of having a shootout. The fact that he had to shoot it out, I don't know.
But Paris was how many years ago? Was it 4 or 5 years ago?
Yeah.
Yeah. So he's had 4 or 5 years to mature and think about it.
That's true.
He's acting just like an American politician, a Republican, in fact. I mean, unabashedly apologizing for things damn well he's happy he did
Right.
And sorry he failed.
I did not have sexual relations with that woman.
Yeah.
Wrong president, but
Yeah, at
same
least not
attitude.
the week after, you know.
As for what motivates these people, well, what motivated
in a meeting at the moment? I'll bring you back.
what motivated them to fly into the Twin Towers on 9/11? Eh? It seems to me that they're driven to become martyrs because there's this big prize in paradise of 72 virgins and unlimited wine flowing.
Well, I mean, it's like you can see your life as a weapon if you have, in certain circumstances, you can be convinced of that. So, like, you don't see your life like how we see our lives. You can see your life as an actionable thing that can be sacrificed to the detriment of the enemy, which is worthwhile. Plus, if there's, if this is just a change of address, death is just a change of address, it puts the perspective of what death is a lot better for someone who has that kind of conviction. But, in my head, it's like we do have capital punishment here in the United States, and we use it on far less grievances. So I can leave it at that.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Right. Okay. We'll move on then, because I don't suppose any of you ever expected Sweden to be part of this news item about, religious harm. Well, we were all wrong, because there's a far-right politician named of Rasmus Paludans who decided to stage public burnings of the Quran. And I don't suppose it was a surprise to him, but he sparked some violent protests. He started in Thursday in a town called, and I'm embarrassed to say this because I know that Swedish Steve is listening, Jönköping, where the priest in the nearby church rang the bells to warn people of this danger. And the next Quran burning was in Linköping. No, I won't do my comedy Swedish accent. And then he moved on to the next place, and the next stop on his itinerary was Norrköping. And the rioting there was even more intensive. But on Friday, he was in Rinkeby, which is a part of Stockholm that's famous for its immigrants. So he's obviously going into the lion's den and burning another Quran. So what do you think of that?
As a pastafarian, just trying to get my driver's license while wearing my tricorn hat and my holy tricorn hat, they see that as blasphemous. You know what I mean? So, these, it's just mind-boggling how easily triggered people of apparent conviction are, or can be, it blows my mind.
Well, he's doing that in Stockholm, but would he do that in the Middle East? It's just crazy.
It is provocative. It is provocative, but it's it should be possible to burn a piece of paper without
You can do it here in the U.S.
Mm-hmm.
I mean,
you can burn Bibles and whatever.
There was a woman on Facebook who tore out the misogynist pages or some misogynist pages from the Bible and used it to, I think, to wrap some weed up that she was going to smoke.
Dread,
that's cool.
I got a thought process for you, Dread, and I'd love to hear what you think about this. If I had two blank books, and then on one of the blank books, I transcribed the Bible on it, word for word, and I burned both of them, but the one with the Bible text didn't burn, right? But otherwise, they were identical to start with. Wouldn't that be like pretty good, notable scientific inquiry of like, well, what's going on here?
It's worth asking a question about why. It doesn't constitute automatically as evidence for anything.
True. So, but here would be my point. If Bibles didn't burn, or if holy books didn't burn in the first place, period. To where even if you want to be blasphemous, it's like, doesn't matter. Those things are impenetrable. Once you write that stuff on that book, you can't damage that book. You might as well be wearing a bulletproof vest. That would be in my head of like, well, why doesn't God just make holy books not burnable?
There you go.
Because then at that point I'd be like, oh,
a very valid point.
That would not only help his cause, but also convince people who may have been on the fence of like, hey, wait, this is a special book now.
Right. Yeah. No, that makes absolute sense.
A very useful miracle. Yeah, just make them infallible.
But which version?
All of them. I don't know. Pick the one that doesn't burn. The one that doesn't burn is the true one. And honestly, just like God, just make the Bible not burn.
That's right.
Honestly. And maybe the fact that they do burn should tell us something.
I don't know if any of you have ever tried to light a book, but they are extremely difficult to set fire to because they've been made by taking wood, which is a sponge full of air, and crushing all the air out of it and making it into paper. And then you have something which is extremely difficult because of its compactness and the fact that it only has this much surface for air to be in contact with.
John, we could take you to some local book burnings where they burn university textbooks on evolution. There's some things we can show you here in Tennessee.
Okay, I'll believe you.
With a little bit of lighter fluid, anything burns.
That's the secret. Yeah.
Is this the explanation for why there are reports of house fires which have burnt everything down except for the Bible on the bedside table?
It could be. Yeah, could be. They are very difficult to set fire to.
Now, they don't mention the other 150 books in the library that also didn't burn.
Darwin's Origin of Species and
yes, absolutely.
A Brief History of Time.
My suspicion, Frank, is that if they've got the Bible on the bedside table, that may be the only book in the house.
So
that's a good point too.
My final points on this is we're quick to say thank God, but we should be also saying blame God more often. And in this case, it's a blame God situation. It's like God shouldn't make Bibles burn, period, or Qurans burn.
It's on
at that point. Once you have that, then it doesn't matter what they do with the Bible because it's going to float, it's going to not burn, it's going to stay intact no matter what.
Right.
That's how you know it's the real one.
Yeah.
Could have been that simple.
Make it once.
Okay. Well, I'm going to take us away from that now because something interesting happened in the UK last weekend because the Archbishop of Canterbury, and I mentioned this in the show that we were in earlier, Ty and Dread, he came on and said that he was against the government's policy to send immigrants to Rwanda for processing because it was opposite to the nature of God. Now, obviously, he's the Archbishop, so he's got a hotline, he has access to God's nature, but I want that checked. I want to know, how does he know what the nature of God is and what God's attitude is towards our government's policy?
What would satisfy you as an answer, John Richard?
Well, I'm not expertise enough to track this down, but we do have the technology. How
about a diagnosis of schizophrenia? Would that satisfy you?
Yeah,
maybe.
Or the Diagnostic Standards Manual.
Yeah. So if I recall correctly, you're going to have a conversation with a guy named Kevin Hovind pretty soon, and it's not an unreasonable question that he's probably going to ask you something in the lines of, well, if you are John Richards are confused by how this guy did it, what is the answer that you would accept from a guy like that? Because you need to get used to people shifting the burden of proof on you. It's a terrible question, by the way. But like, honestly, what would it take for you to be as an acceptable answer for, oh, this is how I communicate with God and this is how I get that fact checked?
It's such a bizarre claim. I can't think of anything that would come up as convincing evidence. Can you?
Well, like I say, something, anything that might come up, you could just check it against the Psychiatric Diagnostic Standards Manual, and it would, by definition, be delusion, right?
Yes,
right.
And that's exactly what we're trying to do, because here in the UK we have fullfact.org, and their remit is to check claims, mostly made by politicians and businesses trying to sell you something under false pretenses, but they also take a look at religious claims too. So we're swamping their inbox to try and get them to check the claims of the Archbishop of Canterbury that he knows the mind of God.
For me, I would just say obviously I think what you're saying is true. Like, it's not up to me to determine that for a God that's all powerful or whatever it's claimed to be. But at a minimum, I would love for it to be a testable process that's also falsifiable. And if it's neither of those things, then it's in the same basket of things that are equivalent to lies, delusions, hallucinations. And if we can't get something that's testable or even falsifiable, sometimes you can't even get both. It's not a high standard of methodology that you're using. And why subscribe to anything less when we're dealing with God, right?
Yeah.
Especially when we know things like a devil exists, right?
Yeah. If you're trying to find a reliable way to truth, just speaking off the top of your head isn't the way to do it.
Exactly.
No standard of evidence, forget it.
I hope it's like testable and falsifiable. That's it.
Yeah. Well, it's like Christopher Hitchens, the Hitchens razor. That which can be asserted without evidence can also be dismissed without evidence.
Right.
And God has no case for special pleading to be made about him.
Yeah.
Of course.
I mean, I suspect, he will be basing his understanding of the nature of God on the Bible and on his theological training and all of that kind of stuff. But it boils down to faith, essentially, as I understand it. And I'd like to see anything better than that being produced.
Right.
Absolutely.
And we know you can pull anything from the Bible like a Rorschach,
Yes.
Yeah, for sure.
That's not a very convincing method either for me personally.
Speaking of faith, we have another faith leader, Pope Francis, who, of course, he gets an outing at Easter time as well. And in his speech, he decided that even the priests are vulnerable to falling under the spell of idols, which replace their faith in God. But you wouldn't believe what he considers to be idolatry. There's pragmatism, because that focuses on statistics and numbers that can depersonalize every discussion and appeal to the majority as a definitive criterion for discernment. He doesn't like that. The rest of us think that's empiricism, but it's not good enough. He also,
it is, isn't it?
he also thinks that another idol is functionalism, because that focuses on efficiency.
That's pragmatism.
But according to him, the priest with a functionalist mindset has his own nourishment, which is his ego, in mind, and not the worship of the Father. So what he's saying is he wants his priests to remain ignorant, unscientific, and just do subservient worship.
What is pragmatism without functionalism? Explain this to me. I really want. Oh man. Well, wouldn't that be great that a guy who says you can't be functional and then provides definitions that are inherently non-functional? I love it.
Yeah.
I mean, it boils down, doesn't it, to the difference between religious people who have the center of their worldview focused on an imaginary being, and non-religious people whose center is focused on humanity and how to make things better in a practical way for them. That's the big difference, isn't it?
Absolutely. Yeah. So I'll give him a final word here. Pragmatism and functionalism lead priests to replace hope with empirical results, the Pope said.
Oh my. Not terrible.
You can hope for the best.
Oh, not that.
We don't want the best. We just want to hope for it. That makes sense. Yeah. Don't give us the best. We just want to hope for it.
And that should be a quality of like who they hire. If that's a hiring methodology too, that's a terrible.
He hasn't quite finished.
Oh
he
no!
Goodness!
He says,
there's more.
That makes clergy members focus on vainglory and power instead of their faith and flock. So there you go.
Oh, there you go.
Now we've got to go into a rather more black mood now, I'm afraid, because in Nigeria, a notoriously religious country, in Easter time, they like to reenact the crucifixion of Jesus Christ. It's a play that they call The Passion of Christ, and they adopt roles, and one of them is nailed to a cross, and the others are all marching behind, and so on and so forth. And one of these poor guys who was reenacting a scene in which he was playing St. Peter. Well, not St. Peter. Before Peter was sanctified, that's not the word, is it? Canonized. Peter was Simon Peter, who was one of the disciples. And the scene is where Peter cuts off a soldier's ear to protect Jesus. Now, don't ask me why. I don't see the connection myself. But the person who was playing Peter was quickly rushed to hospital, where he was pronounced dead. And the eyewitnesses thought that it was a joke. They thought that he was acting part of the drama, and it wasn't true. It wasn't a real collapse, that it was.
I know what happened. I know what happened. God did it.
You reckon? Yeah.
I mean,
God didn't like his performance, so he struck him dead.
Was there no cause of death? I mean, they reported?
Well, not that's reached my ears yet, but Nigerian news outlets are notoriously, it's like trying to wade through treacle to get something sensible out of them. Anyway, that's a very sad incident.
Sorry, I didn't understand that. The person who actually was he striking the ear off somebody, and he collapsed at that point when he was attacking somebody else. Is that right?
Well, I don't know. You're asking the wrong person here. We need to find out.
I mean, I sort of noticed something going on. I thought it was one of the people who was actually being crucified. He died. But
that would be
ironic. I could be quite wrong about that. I'm sorry. Yeah,
I think that's happened before in the Philippines, but this is a separate incident. Okay. Well, now you'll be pleased to hear that Pastor Tony Spell, going to the US now, of the Life Tabernacle Church in Baton Rouge, Louisiana, he wants to run the government, or at least he wants to have the right to veto government policies that he doesn't like and command other policies instead. So if you haven't seen the video of him
that was something
making
else.
that proclamation, I'd encourage you to watch yesterday's Global Atheist News, because it's well worth a gulp. And I'm going to end with two things, again, US related. One is good news.
Yay! I love
attendance. Yes, we like a bit of good news. The church attendance has fallen below 50% for the first time in 8 decades, a recent poll by Gallup has revealed.
And was that over Easter?
That's in the USA.
Yeah,
that's a big deal. That's a big deal. Love it. Love it. Love it. Love it.
Yeah,
absolutely. The poll.
When you say
celebrate.
So when you say in eight decades, is that since they've been keeping track of that?
Yeah, that's right.
Okay, because 8 decades ago it wasn't low; it was high.
Gallup, the polling organization,
okay,
began in the 1930s, and so they've had 8 decades of recording similar polls. Where they ask the same questions every year or every decade. And this one was conducted in 2020, and we've just got the results. They've processed the results and released them. And it says that just 47% of US citizens state they belong to a church, synagogue, or mosque.
They just belong. Wow. So wow, that's just talking. Great.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Because a lot of those guys probably aren't even going to church in the first place. So.
I said it was good news.
Yeah.
Nice.
Canada, like I said, the Ipsos Reid poll we had here, similar results.
Yeah.
I have been noticing that I like going out on Sunday mornings as an atheist because there's so little traffic, and like anyone walking the street, you'd be like, "Yeah," and he's like, "I see you, I see you, I see you." It's like you need to know who the good people are. But I've been noticing it's been getting a bit more crowded, so like my weekends aren't as enjoyable. Sunday mornings, they seem to be less elbow space.
Yeah. So I know many of us haven't been flying lately because of COVID and lockdown and so on. But apparently, in a plane that was probably on its way to Germany, some Christian singers stood up and entertained the passengers to hymns accompanied by a guitar. And this was led by a Mr. Jack Jentz, who describes himself as the founder of a religious organization called Kingdom Realm Ministries, and it's based in Philadelphia. So are you glad, guys, that you weren't on that flight?
Yeah.
I actually would have liked to have been on that flight because I would have sang Lover Boys Raise a Little Hell.
Yes.
Okay, well, that's the end of my items for review. So thank you very much. You have been truly wonderful, as I knew you would be. I hope you can join us regularly in this show. And in the meantime, take the rest of the day off and take care.
Sounds good. Thanks a lot.
Hey, everybody.
Cheers.
Hang in there, guys. See you later.
See you later.
Bye-bye.
Cheers and beers.
Cheers and
Yes.
beers.
I like it.